Yep. He's now in second place by a decent margin, according to the most recent polls that have come out. And I wondered what your reaction was to that, Kamali.
Yeah, I think that, the person that he slipped in the polls to, I think it's unfortunate, like if Andrew Yang versus Eric Adams is now leading the pack, and the dude is he takes a ton of real estate lobbyist money. He's your typical neoliberal, Democratic Party hack. He's, part of the Democratic Party machine in New York. So, if you put up Adams versus Yang, give me Yang all day on that. I'll take, just anything that's not the political establishment continuing what they do. But I would love if we saw Diane Morales coming up in this, then that would excite me about this. I mean, I think that what this has to do with, maybe, there's been a lot of some of these hit pieces against Andrew Yang. I thought that there was some valid criticisms of Andrew Yang. The New York Times actually did one decent piece on Andrew Yang recently, where they did an investigative,
work. We covered that on our show. The venture.
I saw. I saw, and that was actually valid criticism of Andrew Yang. And so I don't know if that's having some impact here. The realization that he's sort of, in that sense, I think a little Trumpian in that sense of sort of a failed businessman that's portraying himself. And I don't want to say failed business, totally failed business. But I mean, no.
Actually, you touched on a point that I wanted to get to right there, Kamali. And here's what I think is the fundamental problem that Andrew Yang is having now as he's kind of transitioned. He did a pivot, right? I feel like he's done multiple pivots, but his first pivot was obviously when he, stepped away from Medicare for all and those kinds of things. But then there were more pivots even now that he's come to run for mayor, and he's really aligned himself as what I would just consider as maybe a mildly interesting Democrat. This dude is, very capitalist instinct. His transformative ideas all involve working cooperatively with big business. He's super steeped in Silicon Valley groupthink. He has all these startup solutions. And as somebody who has spent too much time for their own good around startup people, that shit just repels me a motherfucker.
Same. If his idea for his stupid startup had actually been successful, then that would be one thing. But it was a complete failure that basically proved the futility in its own purpose.
Exactly.
So that leads me to believe that his ideas to reform politics in New York City will likely similarly fail, and they're all just basically marketing in the first place.
Exactly. I was making a different point really quickly, though. The only thing I wanted to say was that you mentioned, Kamali, is that he has this very Trumpian. He kind of was running as an outsider in this in the presidential campaign, but now he's trying to run as an insider, and therefore the media can destroy him, right? Because Trump was only able to maintain his invincibility to the media was because he was a complete outsider. And even though Fox News was worshiping him, nobody that watches Fox News considers Fox News to be mainstream media, even though obviously it is.
Yeah. I think that's true. I do think that's absolutely accurate. And also, I want to mention, because as this poll has been released and it's revealed that Yang has slipped, some people, some Yang gangers are trying to point the finger and be like, oh, well, what people are, this is because people are being too critical of Andrew Yang and they're pointing out his flaws. And to some extent, like we talked about, the mainstream media is unfairly smearing Yang in certain instances. That's undeniable. But it's not the fault of the media for being honest about and looking into the record and ideas of the person who's leading in the race to become mayor of the country's biggest city. That's our fucking job. So it's not my job to sit here and simp for a politician or to tell you something that's not true about him. And if that ruins his lead in the polls because people are honest about his record and honest about his ideas, then that's his fucking fault. It's not the media's fault. It's not journalists' fault. It's definitely not our faults for having honest discussions about the dude. And while I agree he might be slightly better than Eric Adams, I'm really not convinced that Andrew Yang would do anything differently than a normie dim. He's proven thus far to have started out with some bold, radical populist positions. And from what we've seen since the beginning, it is a slow but sure watering down of almost everything he originally said he stood for, including UBI, which he's not running on for mayor of New York. So, I mean, at this point, his metamorphosis is almost complete. He's basically just a normie dim anyway. He just has this outsider zeal because he's a failed businessman instead of a shitty politician.
Yeah, and I don't even know to what extent it's a metamorphosis. I know I agree with you entirely on what you just said, and I just don't know to what extent it's an actual metamorphosis, because for me, this is sort of the analysis that I had of Andrew Yang since really just like the first few months of him hitting the national stage and seeing what the Medicare for All pivot was like. That is a massive just red flag to me. But then also with the UBI program, it was always this backdooring of a pro-capitalist policy. We got to be real about what UBI is and how that does benefit the capitalist class. The capitalist class is fine.
UBI is, if we follow Yang's, because Gavin and I have argued about this ad nauseum, and I have come around in my feeling, because I used to feel 100% how you felt, Kamala. The only reason that I am more sympathetic to UBI now is that I do think that it could be effectively leveraged as a transitionary element if it was redesigned in its structure. But you're 100% correct. Andrew Yang's UBI proposal would gut social safety nets and be basically regressively or financed by
at least that's what he's in his own words said multiple times on several different interviews. So if you want to come at us for saying that, it's in his own fucking words. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that his solutions, like what Zach I think pointed out, was that he's very sort of, it's these Silicon Valley technocratic solutions to everything, and it shows even in the Venture for America, the organization that that business that he founded. The whole concept of this was that we're gonna take these these college kids fresh out of college, these tech entrepreneurs, we're gonna put them in cities all over the country, and then and they're gonna create jobs. This is just,
we need smart people building things. That's all we need. That he said that a million times. It's like his own thesis has failed every time it's been tested.
It's this like top down, this idea that there has to be these people at the top, and they're gonna come and they're gonna be the the leaders at the top, and they're gonna dictate down to everyone else. It's not a grassroots collective strategy. And it's to me, there's nothing left wing about that. It's certainly anti-establishment. It's just not left wing. And I am a socialist. Nothing that Andrew Yang is proposing is in any way socialist. And he absolutely believes in capitalism, is a fan of capitalism, and would like to save capitalism. And I think that what he's talking about and the measures that he's taking are in that vein.
Really.
I like to, just a quick joke, Gavin.
You're good.
I was gonna say, I said in my mind, I've been calling Andrew Yang Captain Save a Capitalist. Just like, I just think it's the perfect metaphor for who he is. He's like human compassionate capitalism. It's like all the kind of shit that was spoon fed to me when I was in my undergrad in business school, hating my life, like fucking.
He truly does redirect socialist or anti-capitalist energy into this bullshit line of thinking that you can innovate your way out of the horrors that have been perpetuated by the system. And lastly, I wanted to say on the fact that he's dropping in the polls, because again, a lot of people are upset about this, mostly the Yang gang. I do think there's something to be said for this effect that I've experienced. When I first heard about Andrew Yang and when I first listened to Andrew Yang, I really did think he was a genuine person. I thought he was the most, likable and friendly and genuine and all these words. I really thought that's what embodied the man, even though I've always had political disagreements with him. I always thought his heart was in the right place. But since that position was founded, it's only been a deterioration of that belief. Every time I see him now, or not every time, but more and more when I see him now, I see his phoniness slip. I see that slip out. The facade of being a genuine, honest folk or whatever, that is slipping away the more you study the guy. And I think it especially comes out when he's under pressure and when he knows that he's giving you a line of bullshit. I think when he was interviewed by Crystal and Kyle about BDS, I thought that was just a perfect moment to illustrate what I'm talking about. He turns from his affable personality into kind of an annoyed, kind of like I'm above this, and it just starts to ruin this image he's built up for himself as exactly what I've been talking about, this affable, genuine guy. And I think that to some extent that could be responsible for his fall in the polls too, because the mayoral race has been going on for a while, and people might be getting tired of Andrew Yang's fucking shtick.